Welcome, everyone. My name is Adrienne Miller. I am a competent woman, and I am the President and CEO of Women for Sobriety Incorporated. We are an abstinence-based self-help program for women in recovery from alcohol and other drug addiction. And this is Tuesday Talks, where I get super nerdy about the program and share some of my thoughts about the program. So today we're talking about Statement 13. This is the last one of our acceptance statements. And so this statement reads, I am responsible for myself and for my actions. And the thought action, the second part is, I am in charge of my mind, my thoughts, and my life. So we like to start off with a little history lesson. So here's a little something that might blow your mind. This blew my mind when I first read it. This statement was first printed as, I am responsible for myself and for my sisters. What? Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, why that felt so shocking to me. But that's how it was first printed. I am responsible for myself and for my sisters. And in 1983 was the first thought action printing. And this too blew my mind. The thought action for Statement 13 was originally to help others to find the way is what I'm now ready for. And I'm glad I didn't read that my first week in Women for Sobriety, because I would have been like, I'm not ready for that at all. But anyway, that's what it was originally. In December of 1986, some of you will recall Dr. Kirkpatrick changed a number of statements, and one of them was Statement 13. So she changed it from I am responsible for myself and my sisters to I am responsible for myself and for my actions, which is what we know it as today. And here's what she had to say about that change. Statement number 13 had been objected to by many women for many years. Now, since the change has been made, a number of women want to keep responsible to myself and to my sisters instead of the new phrase, I am responsible for myself and my actions. Again, many persons believe that they had enough trouble being responsible for self and couldn't take on any more. I like the original, but I did understand the dislike of it by many. So now it reads that we are responsible for ourselves and our actions. So that she printed that in April of 1987. So just a few months after the original change. And then, but the thought action I think was the same. Now I couldn't find anything in the Sobering Thoughts newsletter between December of 1986 and January of 1988 where the thought actions were printed. But in January of 1988, the thought actions were printed. And Statement 13, the thought action had changed from to help others to find the way is what I'm now ready for, and had changed to what we know today, which is I am in charge of my mind, my thoughts, and my life. So there's your little history lesson about Statement 13. Big changes from I am responsible for myself and my sisters to help others to find the way is what I'm now ready for, to the current I am responsible for myself and for my actions. I'm in charge of my mind, my thoughts, and my life. And I'll tell you, part of what was so shocking to me when I first read the original Statement 13 was that it said I was responsible for someone else, because a huge part of Statement 13 for me is kind of the underlying implication that if I'm responsible for myself and my actions, then you're responsible for yourself and your actions. And that was actually like a really key part of my recovery, right? Is learning to let go of trying to be responsible for what someone else has said or done, or what they will say or will do, right? And just accepting that I'm the only one I can be responsible for. I'm the only one whose actions I can control. My being able to control my thoughts was a key piece of my recovery, and what I could affect in life. And, just that I was responsible for myself only, and that I didn't have to try to be responsible for you. And so the first time I read the original version, I was like, what? what? I can't be responsible for anyone else. So I totally understand why people objected to that one. And I thank Jean for changing that one, because I think that was a really good call. And I wanted to delve just a little bit more too into self-responsibility. And I may have touched on this a little bit in statement one, but this one, I think, I think of statement one as more my short-term recovery statement. And then number 13 for me is really like my long-term recovery statement, right? So being responsible for myself and for my actions in the long term. And again, that's just how I think of it. That's not how it's written. That's not the intent of it. But for me, really, really taking responsibility for myself and my recovery in the long term is really closely tied to number 13 in my mind. And one thing that I learned early on, and I don't know if I put this together myself or if I heard it somewhere, but addiction wasn't my fault, but recovery is my responsibility. And it's true. I chose to pick up that first weed pipe, or however I did weed the first time. I chose to pick up that first drink of alcohol. I made certain choices to use substances, but I did not go into it expecting to become addicted. In fact, I went into it the same way a lot of my friends were going into it, right? We were teenagers, we were experimenting, we were checking out what this whole substance use was all about. And in that, even though I was using the exact same way my friends were, somehow I progressed into addiction and they didn't. And so for me, really learning that, like, I'm not really consciously responsible for my addiction. I didn't choose to have an addiction, but I do have to take really conscious responsibility for my recovery. And I've seen time and time again, and we all hear of this, people who go on autopilot with their recovery. It's so easy to slip back into using. And so I really view number 13 as this is my long-term, lifelong responsibility to attend to my thoughts, my actions, my life, and make sure that I stay in a healthy place where drinking and drugging doesn't seem like a good option anymore. And that is really a conscious effort for me, and I have to take responsibility for that. So how do I do that? I have just a couple pragmatic suggestions on things that we can do to help apply this statement in daily life. So I will launch into those now. Let's see. So I got two mantras in this section. So one is to make a mantra anytime you find yourself blaming somebody else for your actions. And we all have seen this, right? He made me so mad. I wouldn't have to do this if she didn't do that, right? So we see this all the time. So creating a mantra, like even just I am responsible for myself and for my actions, right? Regardless of what anyone else is doing out there, in here, I'm responsible for myself and my actions. So that's the first mantra. Now, the second mantra is for those of us who find ourselves blaming ourselves for someone else's actions, right? Well, he wouldn't have done that if I hadn't, or it's all my fault, my kids are a wreck, or it's all my fault, this or that, right? And the truth is, yes, there are things that we can do that can have impact on others, but ultimately they are responsible for their reactions, their actions in the moment. So coming up with a mantra for that, for when that starts to come up. So it might be keeping it simple. He's responsible for his actions. And so every time I think, gosh, I've really screwed this kid up. No, you know what? He's responsible for his actions. Very simple mantra that can really help kind of cement in your mind that you can't control other people's behavior. this for statement 13, I bring back the ta-da list. So I think we talked about this maybe in relation to statement 6 or something, our ta-da list. So, but this is, this one is not like all the things that you got done that day, but this is really a self-reflection kind of thing, right? So make a list of all the ways that you are taking charge of your mind and your thoughts, and how you've already changed the way you think for the better. So really looking at your self-responsibility and giving yourself a little kudos, like, ta-da, look what you did, right? And really just acknowledging the growth that you've experienced so far. And this can also help you kind of reflect on ways that you could bring even more self-responsibility into your recovery in the future. My fourth pragmatic tip for applying statement 13 to everyday life would be really some deep self-reflection. So, and this is really after a difficult situation, an argument, a disagreement with someone, facing a challenge at work, encountering a problem, right? This is really deep. Okay, what was my responsibility in that? And it's really easy for us to get defensive. And again, well, if he hadn't done this, or, this should have happened, one of the most dangerous phrases in the world, should have, this should have happened, or if so-and-so had only done that, right? But really look at, okay, how did I show up in this situation? And what can I learn about what I brought to the situation that I might be able to learn and grow from in the future? Usually, like when you're in the thick of it and your hackles are up and your defenses are up, especially in the beginning, that's a terrible time for self-reflection. You may not be very good at it at that point. So really making a conscious effort afterwards to sit and self-reflect and ask yourself the tough questions about, what was my part? How did I contribute? And then as you get better at doing that, you'll get better and better at kind of stopping yourself in the moment and saying, how do I want to be responsible for myself right now? How do I want to show up right now in this moment? And my last pragmatic tip for how to apply number 13 in your daily life is goal setting. And we've talked about this before as well. But setting goals for the life that you want, right? And not just large goals, but small goals too, or incremental goals. If you have something really big that you want to take responsibility for manifesting in your life, right? How are you going to make that happen, right? Dreams and wishes are not a career plan. They're not a life plan. So if you really want something to happen, how can you set up goals and benchmarks and targets to work towards? So that's our fifth way of practicing statement 13 in your daily life. So I hope that's been helpful. That concludes my Tuesday talk on statement 13. I also want to take a moment to just reflect on that we are at statement 13, and I've been doing the 13 statements, I was looking back, since August. And every other week I've brought a different statement, talked about a different statement. And I'm feeling a little nostalgic because, of course, now it's time to move on to something else. So I have some really great topics in mind. Stuff about, like, why is WFS abstinence based? What does abstinence mean? And why is that the path that WFS endorses? What about the abstinence violation effect? What about the disease debate? Do we think addiction is a disease or not a disease? Some other ideas, talking about marijuana, right? There's this whole thing about, is marijuana addictive or not? So delving a little bit more into that. Shame and guilt, confidentiality, toxic positivity. These are just some of the ideas that I've had to talk about on these Tuesday talks. If you have a recovery topic that you really want to hear about, like post-acute withdrawal syndrome, or I don't know, anything that you've heard about in your time in the program, let me know. Drop a comment in this thread. Actually, I get a notification every time someone comments on these threads. So let me know what topics you would like me to cover in the next few weeks, months, whatever coming up. And then when I need a break, we'll probably delve into the levels, which are also a really fun way to think about the program. So that's it. That's all I got for you this week. Thanks so much for showing up, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks.